All right, everyone, welcome back to week 11 of the Bad Owners Dynasty Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Nick of the Plano Nukes, and with me today is not Garrett, it is Brandon of the Trash Fires.
Yes, subbing in for who is usually here, Garrett with the Castle Rock Rockers. We knew it was coming, the Thanksgiving holiday, so he's off with family, and I am subbing in for him.
Awesome. Well, it's an exciting week. Week 11 is the final week of trades. After the Monday night game, the trade deadline is boom, done. So no more trades are going to be happening now for the rest of the season. And so that kind of sparked a lot of movement. We'll get into that in a bit with the trades of the week. But first, there was some other news that happened this week.
Yeah, we had a team change.
Yes, a team change. The big Orcas are no longer the big Orcas, but now the No Robins. There's been a management change once again to that team slot, and the No Robins are now managing what used to be the Team 10 slot. Hopefully
and they are right, and they are going with it. They've already made several trades this week.
Yes, 100%. They came in and shook things up right before the trade deadline. It's awesome. I'm happy to see it. It looks like they're ready to make it their own team. So why don't we just go ahead and hop on into the trades of the week so everyone can see what really they kind of started.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so for trades of the week this week, we have the Castle Rock Rockers, myself with the Plano Nukes, No Robins, the new kid on the block, and the Trash Fires, your team, all having some sort of trade participation.
Yeah.
So let's just go ahead and hop on into the first trade that happened this week after the Monday night game of week 10. A huge trade right off the bat for the No Robins. They've decided to go with the rebuild approach. They took a look at their team. It's near the bottom of the standings. They're not making the playoffs this year. They decided to trade away Jonathan Taylor to me for Robert Tonyan, Kayvon Thibodeau, a 2023 first round pick, a 2023 second round pick via the Atlanta Cicadas, and a 2023 fifth round pick.
They are going for picks.
Absolutely. And young talent. I mean, Kayvon Thibodeau, a fifth overall draft pick of the New York Giants, pass rusher, hasn't really gotten a ton of movement going so far this year, but I mean, he's doing totally fine. He's not, world breaking or anything, but he's doing fine. And Robert Tonyan, of course, the starting tight end of the Packers. The funny thing about this trade is that I think this is actually perfect for both sides, in my opinion. I'm somewhat biased just because I, of course, was part of it, but I desperately was struggling in the running back department. Ezekiel Elliott's getting up there in age. Joe Mixon's then going to be my RB1, of course, he's not old, but he's definitely not young anymore either. And Jonathan Taylor adds a nice elite level talent at a young age to my running back room. Whereas No Robins has been struggling in the tight end position. They didn't really have a tight end. They were desperate for a tight end. Robert Tonyan is going to be a starting tight end somewhere for the next few years for sure. Kayvon Thibodeau is a young prospective defensive line talent. And then, of course, get their first round, second round, and fifth round picks to rebuild through the draft.
Yeah, and no, I mean, I have to agree with you. I do think that this is great value for not only you, but also for No Robins. I mean, as you're saying, Jonathan Taylor, he is a stud, right? He hasn't had a great year this year, but he is elite talent. And so, picking that up for yourself is always great. And then especially since you were saying, No Robins, they're in a rebuild mode, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever we're talking about picks, that's very important to them. So I think that there's great value on both sides for this trade.
100%. So with that, that's the first trade. But like we already talked about, there are so many more. So let's just keep it moving to the second trade that happened this week. The Castle Rock Rockers once again trading with the No Robins. So the No Robins getting a lot of movement, getting a lot of pieces, rebuilding pieces and whatnot. They traded away Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy and their 2023 fifth round pick to the Castle Rock Rockers. But in exchange, they got Derek Carr, DeForest Buckner, Hunter Henry, Jamal Adams, and Will Dissly.
This is an incredibly interesting trade. Help me out here, Nick. I think this is the most players that we've ever seen in a single trade, right? 7 players here changing hands.
I'm trying to think. because I know the Aiden Hutchinson trade was huge, but that was a lot of picks. So I think that you might be right that as far as just active players go, this might be the biggest trade. I cannot think of any that are larger.
Right. And it's not it's not like we're trading rookies here, right? Yeah, I mean, we're talking about Derek Carr, DeForest Buckner, I mean, Amari Cooper. These are top tier guys.
Agreed. This is definitely a swap of, I mean, none of these guys are, bottom feeders at all. I mean, Jamal Adams is arguably one of the best safeties in the NFL. Obviously, he's been on IR this season, so hasn't been able to help the Castle Rock Rockers out too much. And since they're trying to kind of make a push to hit the playoffs, he's not going to help them with that. DeForest Buckner is a stud defensive lineman, one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. Derek Carr, there's of course some questions, but I don't think that No Robbins paid a huge amount for Derek Carr when you factor in the fact that they also got DeForest Buckner, Jamal Adams, and 2 other tight ends. So this is a crazy trade. I mean, me personally, I don't know who won this trade. It's weird because, and I don't think it's even either. I don't think it's even, but I don't know who won. And I think it's mostly because a lot of these players are hurt or have a lot of question marks surrounding them. The only surefire people in this trade, in my opinion, were Amari Cooper and DeForest Buckner, who were 2 studs that got swapped.
Absolutely. And, it's just really interesting to see. So, you can tell based on looking at this, right? I mean, Castle Rock Rockers is in win now mode, right? And we've talked about that a lot on this podcast. But then we look at No Robbins, and we've just been talking about how they're going for picks. They're in rebuild mode, right? And then here they are picking up, 3, for that matter, 5 good players, right? And it almost seems like this is a win now trade for both teams, right? But I do think that the No Robbins are walking away on top on this trade.
Yeah, 100%. Especially because I think that one thing that might be super undervalued in rebuilding teams is that you do need players. Like, you can't just get picks.
Right.
And so,
I mean, I picked up, I believe, 22 rookies, right? I believe I picked up 22 rookies this first year. You know what I mean? And it's paid off in a lot of ways, as we'll see later. But at the same time, it's not. My max points. You can just look at my max points. They're incredibly low, and so you do, like you're saying, you do need good talent now. You can't just invest everything into future prospects.
Totally agreed. Especially if you want to be able to start competing sooner than like 3 or 4 years out. I think excellent moves. I totally understand why both of these teams made this trade. It'll be curious to see who long term ends up winning this.
Right.
But,
absolutely.
That's not all. Moving on to the third trade of the week. No Robbins again, and you're taking participation in this one. Why don't you go ahead and talk on this trade a little bit?
Yeah. So Chris Olave, right? As I think everybody knows right now, I believe he's wide receiver 11 ranked as a rookie, which is just insane. It's just insane for a rookie. He's definitely, I believe he's ranked according. I can't remember who wrote the article, but I think he's number 2 for rookies this season. And I mean, he's had an amazing season, and I think he's got a really incredible future with the Saints. And so we're looking here, and you see, first, fourth, and 6th round pick, to the No Robbins, right? And they're, as we've said, they're looking to rebuild. So here's those picks for him. But for me, I was willing to give up all of that because I don't have a lot of wide receiver depth on my team. I have Jalen Waddle, I have Mike Evans. Those are 2 star guys, but they both had bye weeks this week. And my points reflected that. I had the lowest points out of any team this week. We'll talk about all of that later. But, I was sitting there looking at that, and I'm thinking, man, I need more talent when it comes to receiving. So that was my, logic in making this trade. And I think it's a pretty even trade. We'll have to wait and see about Chris Olave. But right now he's looking like he's going to be top tier talent for years and years and years to come. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think you absolutely destroyed this trade. I think you won it in a landslide. And the reason for that is because Chris Olave is a rookie, right? He's all intents and purposes, you would have had to use a 2022 first round pick in order to get him in the first place, right? you're basically swapping a 2023 first round pick, which is a gamble. Picks are always a gamble. They can be huge gambles. You can get incredibly talented players for very cheap, but you could also totally whiff. And Chris Olave is a hit in his rookie season for a first round pick. I mean, that's perfect.
Seriously.
And then you're just throwing in a 4th and 6th, which to me is not enough to really overstate the fact that you have a, like you said, top tier stud wide receiver for, in my opinion, relatively cheap. I mean, you would have to use a first in a rookie draft to get him in the first place. So this is awesome for you, I think. And especially because the Saints, of course, have been having a ton of quarterback issues. They don't have for all intents and purposes, they don't have a steady, consistent starting quarterback. They've been swapping between Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton. They've been injury concerned. They haven't been playing very well. And Chris Olave is still putting up crazy points, which means, to me at least, that he's going to produce no matter who's throwing him the ball. This is awesome for you. I think you got an absolute steal here.
Yeah, I definitely think, if we're looking at this, right, I think Chris Olave is worth more than the players that I could have, gone through and picked with these picks, right? I mean, like you're saying, it's a hit or a miss situation with rookies a lot of the time. And I'm with this trade, I'm basically saying I don't think I'm going to hit on 1, 4, or 6, right? So,
or at least do better value-wise than Chris Olave.
Right, definitely.
So I think this was an excellent trade for you. And let's just get on into the last trade that happened this week. 4 trades this week. The last trade was between me and the Castle Rock Rockers. Kareem Hunt for a 2023 6th round pick. I was a little confused by this at first when I got this offer sent to me from the Castle Rock Rockers because, I mean, it's Kareem Hunt, right? It's
Kareem
name.
Hunt. Yeah, he's a household name in the NFL.
Right. So I did a little bit of digging, of course, and obviously he's in a crowded backfield, right? He's behind Nick Chubb, who's one of the best running backs in the NFL, one of the best fantasy running backs, and just real life production running backs, because of course that doesn't always line up, and that's something to always take into consideration. But I think that Kareem Hunt is still an absolute stud, and I mean, talent-wise, is Kareem Hunt getting a little bit older? Yeah. But talent-wise, am I going to get a better player than in the 6th round of the rookie draft? Absolutely not, in my opinion.
Absolutely not. And, and we're talking about, Nick Chubb here, right? I mean, he is, like you're saying, he's RB1, right? He is really good talent, and they're probably going to go for him if they can. But at the same time, the teams that they're playing against are going to know that. And so if they focus Chubb, if they build their defense to focus on Chubb, then who is he going to give the ball to? Well, he's either going to throw it or give it to Kareem Hunt.
And it is interesting, especially because now teams are doing a lot of 2 running backfields.
Right.
I mean, you're seeing it all over the place. And Kareem Hunt is such a receiving threat that, true, like if you start running it down the middle or outside or, even just throwing screens and whatnot to Nick Chubb, and then the defense, like you said, starts keying in on Chubb, Kareem Hunt could be open now. And then you have an elite level running back who would be an RB1 on a ton of other teams who is not the running back that teams are able to dedicate a lot of resources to. So that's interesting. That's an interesting thought process.
Choice. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you came out on top on this trade. I think it just scares Castle Rock Rockers that, Deshaun Watson's coming back. They're about to have, their QB1 back. They're about to have, and that's not to say that Jacoby Brissett's been doing poorly at all.
Right.
But, they're about to have their number 1 QB back. So I think he's just feeling a little bit of the pressure on that run game, and so he was just trying to get a little more value next year. But I do think that you came out on top for sure.
All right, well, that wraps up the trades of the week. Let's go ahead and just get on into the dimes of the week. We've got Castle Rock Rockers, TD11 Tudgays, Atlanta Cicadas, Dallas Clovers, and Point Break FC all having dime participation this week. Neither of us. How odd.
Yeah, I know.
What's going on?
It's a bad week for me, that's for sure.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and see who the quarterback of the week is. Joe Burrow with 28.7 points. Those of you who've been watching the past few weeks might be shocked to see Justin Fields isn't up here again with another 40-point game. He's been absolutely popping off. But it was Joey B this week. 28.7 points for the TD11 Tudgays. 4 touchdowns thrown through an absolute ton of yards, 355 yards. Just an absolute pop-off game. When you have games like that, I mean, of course you're going to be the dime of the week.
Right, absolutely. And that's despite 2 pass interceptions as well.
Right, very true. I mean, like he could have gone even higher theoretically.
Right.
So T11 Tudgays, I mean, no one's really thinking Joe Burrows, and what's the word I'm thinking of? Like out of nowhere type quarterback of the week. He's a top tier fantasy quarterback, but it's good to see him producing always.
Yeah, so, of course.
Moving on to running back of the week. Tony Pollard of the Point Break FC, 36.9 points.
Yeah, and you were talking earlier about Ezekiel Elliott kind of being on the way out, and I mean, Tony Pollard's definitely picking up, where he left off and where he fell flat in past right here, right?
100%. And especially when it comes to things like fantasy-wise, Tony Pollard is awesome.
Yeah, his second 30-point week.
Right. I mean, he's just consistently putting up huge numbers, and it's crazy because typically, I think especially like 5-10 years ago, you don't take the backup running backs to do too crazy amount of points. But nowadays, like it's exactly like we were saying with that Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb situation. Teams are running these shared backfields, and Tony Pollard, being the more receiving running back, receiving threat, is getting some serious work in. You got 2 touchdowns, and he's not even getting that much wear and tear on his body, just due to the fact that Zeke is that workload back, taking a lot of the big hits, runs up the middle. Tony Pollard staying healthy, and this is awesome pickup for Point Break FC, being able to have an excellent running back on their team for who knows how long.
Right.
So, moving on to wide receiver of the week, Davante Adams, top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, absolutely blowing nobody's mind that he is the wide receiver dime of the week. Atlanta Cicadas with 33.1 points from him. I mean, what is there to say aside from the fact that every single week he's a terrifying person to see on the other person's roster?
Right, I don't think anybody would disagree with you on that. It's not an upset like you were saying. He's I think on sleeper wide receiver 3. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean he's just putting up big points like as he's done in the past, and as he'll as far as anybody can tell, as he'll keep doing in the future. Right.
So moving on to tight end of the week, we have the king of all fantasy tight ends, Travis Kelce. The number 1 overall tight end, putting up 35.5 points for Point Break FC.
Another dime for Point Break FC, which led to my loss, of course. But I mean, yeah, it's insane. Anytime you see a tight end, even number 1, go above 30 points, and I mean with 35.5, I mean it's just incredible talent, right? That's just got to be what it is.
100%. And the funny thing is, I saw this actually earlier this week. After this last week, if Travis Kelce was designated as a wide receiver, he would be the number 2 scoring wide receiver this in the this fantasy season.
Which he very well could be, right? I mean, it would just be a change of uniform because that's basically what he's doing, right? I mean, 3 receiving touchdowns, 6 receptions overall with 115 yards on those, right?
Which is absolutely insane.
Insane.
Averaging what is that, like 19 yards per catch? I mean, that's bonkers. So,
yeah.
Travis Kelce, an absolute cheat code to be able to throw into a tight end slot. Point Break FC. I mean, like we said at the beginning of the season, Travis Kelce is just a fantasy world breaker. So there you have it. Point Break FC with the fantasy tight end.
Yeah, for real.
Defensive lineman of the week, Max Crosby of the Castle Rock Rockers. Now, Max Crosby was a part of a trade earlier this season in the BAAD Owners League from the Dallas Clovers to Castle Rock Rockers in a pretty large trade.
Yeah.
And
exchange for 5 picks, I believe.
He wiped out the Castle Rock Rockers draft picks. Now, of course, Castle Rockers with a few other trades, I believe, has one, or maybe two. I don't remember. But it's still nothing. At the time, he gave up all of his future assets, got Max Crosby, and boy, is it paying dividends for him, because Max Crosby is an absolute beast of a fantasy player and, of course, a real-life player.
Right.
And 36 points off the back of 6 tackles, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. I mean, no one does it quite like him, but it's absolutely insane. And the Castle Rockers got a fantastic player to be able to throw in the defensive line spot each week.
Yeah.
And then keep moving on the defensive side of the ball. Jaquan Brisker, DB of the week. I'm going to be honest, I didn't see this coming, but he's been having a pretty decent season, like quietly. Hasn't had, not a lot of games with low point values. I mean, he's gotten a few 20-plus games, getting good snap participation. That's what you want out of a DB.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at defensive players, we kind of expect them to be hovering around, 10 to 15 points pretty much the whole time, and nobody really thinks anything of it, and then Jaquan Brisker comes in, right? Somebody that, I hadn't heard of before. I think you were saying something similar, and just puts up a great week here, just 23 points. There's nothing to complain about there.
Right. And while it is decently low for a DB of the week, I mean, it's the best DB of the week. And so you have the best defensive back of all of them. So there you go. Way to go, Dallas Clovers. He's a rookie. And so this is perfectly in line with what the Dallas Clovers are looking to do this season and over the next few seasons. And finally, linebacker of the week, Nick Bolton, one of the best linebackers in the NFL. He has been, putting up some crazy numbers. He had a bit of a fall off the past 2 weeks, and when I say fall off, I mean 6 points and then 15 points, which
is a fall off for him, right. But for a lot of players, I mean that would for a lot of offensive players, that would be a great couple of weeks, realistically.
I mean, he just doesn't score below 20 points very often. An absolute stud. Castle Rockers are loaded up on defensive talent.
Yeah, no kidding. And I mean, their points this week reflect that and more, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm excited to talk about that because that'll be interesting. But that sums up Dimes of the Week. And moving on to Lost Change, we have CD's Nuts, Plano Nukes, Irving Indica, Atlanta Cicadas, the Trash Fires, and Point Break FC. So it looks like we were able to make our mark on absolutely whiffing on who to start.
Yeah, no kidding.
Way to go,
no kidding. Yeah.
But let's just hop on into the QB bench warmer of the week, Jacoby Brissett.
Yes.
The Browns, 24.86 points.
And I mean, looking at he's a backup QB, right? That's not to say that he's not great talent. I mean, obviously he is. We're saying 24.6 points, but I have Kirk Cousins and I have Justin Herbert, and so for me to put in a backup quarterback it just wouldn't seem to make sense. But at the same time, I mean, this week Kirk Cousins put up 1.2 points versus Jacoby Brissett. I mean, I just keep waiting for Jacoby Brissett to do bad. I just keep waiting for it, and it just doesn't happen. Deshaun Watson's coming back soon, but maybe he has a couple more weeks on. Jacoby Brissett doesn't he? 1 or 2?
Let's see. It's week 11. Oh, this upcoming week, I believe, is his last week as the starter.
Yeah, I might have to sub him in, especially with how bad Kirk Cousins has been playing this season. But anyway, yeah, it's never fun to see your name on this list.
No, and it's weird because Jacoby Brissett does hover between that starting caliber and backup caliber quarterback. I mean, he's one of those quarterbacks who's always going to be one of the best backups in the league, but he's also just like, while he's the starter, is one of the worst starters in the league. And so I can't say I blame you for benching him this week, but he did absolutely make you regret it a little bit. So
yeah,
it happens, but you can't feel too bad about it. In the sort of similar vein, P. Ryan, 30.2 points for myself. Joe Mixon actually went out this game due to a concussion, and P. Ryan stepped up. absolutely popped off, and I don't regret the decision in the slightest. I have him as a handcuff for Joe Mixon. This makes me happy.
Yeah, no, I mean it's just more depth, right? I mean he came out onto the field and proved that he has the potential to be an RB1 on the team. Honestly, in my opinion, right? And this 30-point week just confirms that.
Right, and especially if Joe Mixon goes out, I'm happy to be able to throw him in and not have to worry about anything. So,
yeah,
awesome. Wide receiver bench warmer of the week, Wan'Dale Robinson with 19.4 points. Honestly, not a crazy high bench warmer, or lost change, I should say, this week. Mm-hmm. Now, unfortunately for CD's nuts, right after putting up 19.4 points and being the lost change of the week, he's now on IR.
Yeah, no, knee injury, I believe.
Yep, so CD's nuts can no longer capitalize on the fact that he had a pretty good week. So that's tough. I mean, you want to see your, stud players pop off on the bench for a few weeks and then move to throw them in and just get success out of nowhere, and he is not able to do that at all with him because he is done, most likely, I think, for the season. Tough.
Yeah, it is. It is hard to see, especially like you're saying, because I had, Kenneth Walker, for example, right? I had him on taxi, which is, it's obvious it's a bench seat.
Right.
And I saw him putting up, big points, and so I was able to pull him out and actually put him on my starting line. And that's just not something that CD's nuts is going to get to do, which is always a shame. Right. But when he does come back, I think Robinson could be a starter for sure.
Yeah, and he is a rookie this year. He kind of got his shot just because the Giants have had so many issues injury-wise. I don't think that he was planned to really be playing too often. But he absolutely showed up and showed out, and he is definitely showing why he was drafted where he was, and he is going to potentially be a fantastic piece for CD's nuts for quite a few years in the future.
Right.
Austin Hooper, tight end bench warmer of the week, 19.6 points. This is kind of a weird one.
Yeah, that's a lot for Austin Hooper.
Right. He's not a guy who does well ever. This is just a depth piece. He just did this off 2 touchdowns and 4 targets. So he's only targeted 4 times, which is pretty normal for him. Very low target guy. He's mostly in for blocking, but 2 touchdowns for him. It's just a weird week. I don't think that Irving Indica can really take too much out of this. It's not really like, Austin Hooper's doing well now. No, it's just a thing that happened.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, we'll see. We'll see if he can keep doing it. Maybe this is his exposure to the Titans, that he can be a tight end that can do this. But I think it is more likely that it was just kind of a really good week for him. I don't want to call it a fluke because he is a talented guy, but I think this was just a really good week for him.
Totally agree. On the defensive side of the ball, we have Trey Hendrickson getting 32 points for Point Break FC. Trey Hendrickson is an absolute beast of a defensive lineman. It looks like, though, throughout this season, fantasy-wise, he hasn't been putting up too much, but this week he really turned it all around and got 2 sacks, which, of course, shoot on up those fantasy point values. His other big game this season was week 3 against the New York Jets when he got 2.5 sacks that week. So it seems like this guy's very sack-dependent, which is not something you want out of a player.
It's not consistent, because the line changes team to team just so drastically, and I think his points reflect that, right? 2 30-point weeks on those games where he can get the sacks, but every other week, I'm looking at it, 10, 6, 12, 5, 2 points. He's got it when he can get it, but when he can't get it, he doesn't have it. If that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense. The issue is this the type of guy that if you need a Hail Mary or like you need a depth piece, you can throw him in and just kind of hope? Yeah, sure. But he's not a starting caliber fantasy defensive lineman. Real life, 100%. This guy's an amazing player, but not going to be a consistent starter for your fantasy team. So I don't think Point Break can be too upset about this one. It's just, well, he popped off.
Yeah, true. And they did fine this week as well. So they're probably not kicking themselves
don't
at
care
all.
at all, most likely.
Yeah.
DB of the week, Jaron Curse of the Atlanta Cicadas. 21 points, nothing too crazy as far as lost change goes. It seems like everyone is kind of figuring out who, this season's good players are, so we're not seeing any crazy lost changes like we were somewhat earlier in the season. But 21 points, he got a sack. I mean, it's what it is.
That's how it happens. He cut through and got a sack, and that's enough in this league to put him on, lost change.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like defensive players, sacks and interceptions are the same as offensive players' touchdowns. It's not a consistent stat, and it's not what you should evaluate players off of. But on weeks that, a tight end gets 2 touchdowns or a running back gets 2 touchdowns, they'll just pop off out of nowhere. But you have to sort of realize that and analyze that and say, hey, unless they are a consistent red zone use case threat like Jamal Williams of the Lions, where all of his points are because he is being utilized in that way, as far as whenever the Lions get into the red zone, they're giving it to Jamal Williams to pound it in. You don't want to use touchdowns, interceptions, sacks as like a consistent thing, unless it's, of course, like I was saying, like if it's, a guy who's putting up crazy sack numbers on the season and is getting like 1 sack a game, 2 sacks a game, throw him in. I mean, he's just popping off. But that's not most players.
Yeah, I don't think that's Jaron Curse.
Exactly. I mean, that's his second sack of the season. He got 5 tackles aside from that, which, again, making the offensive comparison, tackles are kind of the defensive version of targets and receptions, which is where you kind of want to be looking more towards as far as consistency-wise. He's fine. He's a great depth piece for the Atlanta Cicadas. They're not going to be upset about not having started him this week, though.
Right.
And then linebacker of the week, Matt Milano of the Bills, another Atlanta Cicadas defensive player, absolutely just decided to put up a crazy fantasy score of 36 points.
And that's with 1 sack as well. Right. Usually when you see a defensive player score this highly, it's because they cut through and got a couple sacks. But no, I mean, 8 solo tackles, 3 for loss, 4 assisted tackles, and then that sack and a fumble recovery. It just adds up.
Exactly. And that's the sort of thing too that you're kind of looking for, right? Like getting a nice variety of points from a variety of different sources.
Yeah, and consistently too, for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who he gets a lot of points. I'm curious. I'm gonna take a look at the rest of the Atlanta Cicadas team during this week because I'm curious who they started over him. So Thompson, it looks like he's been having a pretty consistent season, so that makes sense. Jordan Hicks, also he's a bit more of boom bust, but when he booms, he really booms, and he booms often, so I get that. And then Rashawn Evans, another, honestly, Atlanta Cicadas are just absolutely stacked at the linebacker position, and Matt Milano going off every single week, or at least doing consistently well every single week, and then going off on occasion is just, being on his bench is just more of an indication of how stacked that linebacker room is for the Cicadas.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I think he's got a lot of great defensive players, but at the same time, I mean, I know he's kicking himself about that. He's kicking himself about any player he put on this bench because he lost by 3 points, 3.16 points. It's just tough to see a 30 point bench warmer whenever everybody in the position made 10 to 19.
100%. So let's move on into not as good, no dimes, no lost change, the donuts of the week, and we have No Robbins, the new manager, and the Trash Fires, the so-called analytical manager, the guy who's supposed to have all the right answers to all the right situations, and got a donut this week.
Yeah.
Not ideal, huh?
No, it's not. But to be honest, looking at my points, it really wouldn't have mattered. I think, I really had to put Kenneth. Well, I felt like I had to put Kenneth. Well, I'll talk about that when we get there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Into it. So First up, no Robbins, Devin McCourty, 0 points.
Right.
So this is tough. And it's always fun to look at, these donuts, because sometimes it's, the manager just, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Like, that guy was not playing. He was hurt. He's been a bad player. It's like this manager has just had his roster decimated. He's on his last legs. This is like his fourth backup at this position, whatnot. Devin McCourty played 50% of the snaps, right? So he was playing in this game. He puts up consistent points around. I mean, he's not a league breaker. He puts up about an average of 10-ish points per week. Unfortunately, Sleeper, please fix this, but your fantasy points per game does not work for defensive players or anything, so I can't tell specifically unless I add it all up. But it's roughly about 10-ish points per game, at least as a median. 0 points. Nothing. He just got nothing. Nothing just happened. Just came his way. He just didn't participate.
He was just playing.
He was just playing.
Yeah.
So it's just unlucky. I mean, it happens sometimes, unfortunately. But 0 points for the new manager. I'm sure that doesn't feel too good. But at the same time, they're in rebuilding mode. I'm sure they don't care too much. Now, on the other side, linebacker Kenneth Murray of the Trash Fires. What's going on there?
0 points. Yeah, so, I was sitting here. I believe Denzel Perryman was questionable, and I'm looking, I believe at the start of the week, we were at a very close game, 8 to 10 points difference between, projected scores for me versus Point Break FC. And, Kenneth Murray is just, he's a player who puts up 10 points, and I saw questionable on him, and I just decided that I needed to risk it if I wanted to put up and to win against Point Break FC. And, sometimes it just doesn't pay off.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who, like you said, he puts up consistent points. Unfortunately, he went out with an injury during the game.
Yeah.
In the third quarter. And before that, he just hadn't been able to get anything going. So another just kind of unlucky break for you.
Yeah.
0 points in the linebacker position hurts bad. That needs to be one of your high scoring positions generally. So not a fantastic week for the Trash Fires.
Especially with the way that we score fantasy point, or especially with the way we score defensive points in this league. We were just talking about the lost points, right? And we're looking at a lot of defensive players making 20, 30, some odd points. So, in my opinion, you really need to pick up on the defense if you want to stay consistent and win in this league. So anytime you get a 0 there, it just hurts a little worse.
100%. Well, luckily for everyone else, that was the last donut of the week. Only 2 this week. We've actually been having quite a few the past few weeks, and so it looks like everyone's kind of shaped up a little bit. Let's go ahead and just get on into the awards of the week. Best Manager, the Castle Rock Rockers. Wait, how
424 freaking points, man.
Gosh.
It's insane. Highest score we've seen by far, but I know we haven't had a 400 plus. I don't believe we've had a 400 plus.
I think
so. He's already at least 25 points above the highest previous score, and that's at 93% efficiency too, which
is the highest.
It is the highest. I mean, he's. I think Castle Rock Rockers just really came to play this week, and I mean their points reflect it by far. They are scary. Any team that is able to, I think this is higher than the max points have been for most teams
ever
this season.
This is high. This is in fact higher than any other max points have been.
So he is scary. He's coming to play. We saw him make a couple trades this week, but I mean, at this point, we're talking about the Kareem Hunt trade, but I think he knows what he's doing. I mean, look at this.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with results at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what to say. I mean, this is a guy who this week, and we talked about it a little bit last week, he was playing CD's Nuts, and both of those are like the bubble teams. They were tied in record. He needed to get ahead, and our concern was that even if they end up tied record-wise, CD's Nuts has been putting up such big numbers, who was the previous highest scoring per week team, that CD's Nuts would win in a tiebreaker. So Castle Rock Rockers, of course, decided to just put up 424.6 points so that there's no possible way that anyone beats them in a points for tiebreaker.
Yeah, I don't think anybody will. I honestly don't even think Castle Rock Rockers are going to have another 400-point week.
Oh, not even close.
I mean, yeah, this is representational of the top tier talent that he has, but I think a lot of it is it's good decision making. He's 93% efficiency, but it also comes a little bit back to luck on this.
Yeah, and I think like you're saying, it's just crazy, and it's just people. When all your players pop off at the exact same time, there you go.
Yeah.
But of course, props to him for the 93.5% points. Percent efficiency. That's always. That's crazy high too.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. That's up there, probably top. It's definitely top. I think it's probably top 5 efficiency this season for any team.
It's
for
the number
any
1,
week.
I believe, right? Do you remember anything?
I thought there was a couple weeks ago. I thought somebody hit 95%,
Okay,
but I could be
kind of had
wrong
that thought
on
in the back of my mind too, so it's definitely possible. But all right. Well, regardless, crazy high. Now on the flip side, let's look at the worst manager. No Robbins.
Right.
73.1% efficiency. Not great. I think you could make the argument that this is in large part due to being the new owner of your team.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He made a lot of trades this week too, getting rid of a lot of his more consistent talent in order to exchange it for future value. And so maybe just hasn't fully figured out, okay, these are my guys. Because I remember during the start of the season this year, there were a lot of teams that were having some consistency issues, myself included. I was just starting all the wrong people. And it takes a little bit to learn, okay, this guy is a good player this season for fantasy. You know what I mean?
Right. You've got 50 people on your team, and this, being his first week as manager, no Robbins. He hasn't been with his players for the past 10, 11 weeks like the rest of us have, right? We've seen our guys go off or not go off consistently. And so that's how we make that's part of the decision-making process for who to start. And I don't think that, no Robbins had enough time probably to go through and, look at every player's past history and then make those calls. So it's not surprising to see the new manager kind of show up here with a really low efficiency.
Totally agree. Let's move on to the next award, highest points and loss. The Atlanta Cicadas putting up 270.5 points, but still losing. 270 is kind of makes sense as the highest points and loss total. I feel like that tends to be around the level in which you can sometimes eke out a win, but more than not, you shouldn't be expecting to win.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 270 is a pretty regular number, right? And of course, because this is the highest points and loss, we see the median wins split down just above 270, I believe, right? Oh no, they got their
they got the median win.
They did get the median win. Okay,
yeah, and we'll definitely take a look at that later too, for sure.
Right.
No, but yeah,
right.
Like you're saying though, it is a pretty normal score.
Yeah.
So tough break for them, but at least like you said, they hit the median, so it goes, both ways.
It goes both ways. Yeah. They put up consistent points, and that's what happens. You get the median even if you lose the game.
Exactly. Now the lowest points in win, making the Atlanta Cicadas cry a little bit, I'm sure. 244.54 points was enough this week for the Irving Indica to squeak out a W.
Yes. It just won. Still, so as we said, missing that median, but if I can get at least one win, I'll take as few points as I can, right? I don't care. As long as I get a win. So
yeah, especially because like a week that you're putting 244 points, you're probably not expecting to win, right?
Yeah, especially not the median, but I've been looking at your comparison too, and I think honestly, I think it's kind of a lucky break for them, just being up against no Robbins, as we're talking about, the lowest efficiency manager this week. So if you want to be up against somebody when your team is going to score 244 points, you want it to be the new guy. You want it to be the guy that's got that's putting up the least efficiency. So
100%. Let's see. The biggest blowout, to no surprise to anyone who literally just saw that first slide.
Right.
Castle Rock Rockers scored 180.2 points more than CD's Nuts this week.
Which is it's equally as crazy as them scoring over 400 points, right? I mean, a 180 point blowout.
You know what's funny? That I believe is almost the same amount of points as the lowest score that Dallas Clovers has put up this season in the point differential.
Oh wow! Can you believe that?
Imagine if he had played Dallas Clovers that week and put up this crazy score. That would have been awesome.
That would have been that would have been really cool. That would have gone down in our dynasty record books for sure.
Oh, 100%.
Season to season. I mean, and it still might. I mean, it's just crazy points.
Oh yeah, 400 plus points. That's definitely going to be one to remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we already kind of talked on this, so let's just move to the narrowest victory. Dallas Clovers on a victory award.
Yes, good for them.
What is this?
This after this week they've got 4 wins, right? So
yep.
Narrow victories are not something that should be a new idea for them, right? Because at this rate, if they're going to be winning games, it's probably not going to be by a lot, and we've just seen that their talent. It just hasn't always been there.
Right, especially with them trading away so much of it in order to acquire 2023 draft picks.
Which they have a lot of draft picks.
They do, in fact, have a lot of draft picks. That is not a lie. But
so we'll see how next season pans out for them. We'll see if it was worth, a 4-18 record in week 11. We're going into week 12.
Right. Hopefully for them, not hopefully for us.
Right.
So let's just take a look at the head-to-head this week. The median, like we were talking about, was 257.52 points. In sort of the showcase game that everyone was kind of looking forward to as far as to see who is going to make the bubble and who's not going to make the bubble, battling out that 6 and 7 spot. The Castle Rock Rockers at CD's Nuts. Castle Rock Rockers pulled ahead. And their record's actually slightly incorrect there. They're now 12-10, not 10-12.
Yes.
My apologies for that one. But 424.6 points is, in fact, higher than 244.4 points.
I don't think you need a degree to realize that, Nick.
Right.
That is, it's plain as day there.
Yeah, they were able to absolutely rock these
It's
nuts.
in the name, yeah. Hey, look at that.
Look at that.
Yeah, and you were able, moving down, to nuke the Tudgays.
Oh,
300 points. Good. Nothing to be shy about. And it kind of sucks, right? Because if we're looking at league history, right, 300 points has always been up there. It's always, and this could be wrong, but I think 300 points almost always puts you in the top 3, right? And you are in the top 3, but you're being shadowed by 120 points here
right.
with the Castle Rock Rockers, which is, as we've talked about at length, insane. But still, great victory for you. You're definitely. I think this confirms your spot in the playoffs. Correct me. Do you have to get 15 wins?
Like looking at everyone's score, and it'll be easier to see too in the standings. But it's so there's so many teams that are so close together. I'm only 2 games behind first, but
right.
Castle Rock Rockers, who are in 6th, are only 2 games behind me.
Right, and I mean, as we kind of expected, these next couple of weeks are gonna really make or break every team, right? I mean, especially as we're looking at this, but you're in. I think you're in prime position to keep, if you can keep making 300 points. I mean, there's no question to me that you'll be in the playoffs, regardless.
100%. But then, of course, Irving Indica versus No Robbins, 244 points, and was still able to beat No Robbins at 232. That's a huge break for Irving Indica, letting them keep that sort of first place spot, because 244 points is not a good week. And the crazy thing is, this isn't really new for them either. Irving Indica's been having some consistency issues on a week-to-week basis. They, of course, have crazy good weeks and are usually winners, but they do have weeks in which they drop very low in points. So once you start hitting the playoffs and a single bad week will knock you out, that kind of makes me nervous about where Irving Indica's actually, how far they're going to actually be able to get. So securing that first week bye for them is extremely crucial so they can play as few games as possible, right?
Right. No, I mean, it's as of now, I mean, it's working out, right? It doesn't matter if you get 244 points as long as you win.
Right.
And so this is what we keep talking about, right? And it doesn't necessarily even matter about these points. All you have to do is win.
100% agreed. And then Dallas Clovers, this is actually their first 2-win week of the season in week 11.
Right.
First 2-win week, 273.66 points over the Atlanta Cicadas, who coming into this season, a lot of people were thinking they were going to be the number 1 team.
Yeah, for real.
Beat by the absolutely trying to tank team.
Yeah. No, I mean, Atlanta Cicadas, I think, have been in not necessarily everybody's top 3, but I think they've been up there almost very consistently. And so to lose to, like you're saying, the worst team, I mean, I don't know what to make of it, honestly.
Yeah, their season's definitely not going as they wanted or as anyone expected.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last head-to-head matchup of the week, your team, the Trash Fires, getting beat by Point Break FC. 287 points, though, from Point Break. That is nothing to be... Wow, I mean, that's a pretty solid score.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, I think with their record, they're out of contention for the playoffs. But, I think it's just going to show that they, especially with players like Travis Kelce, they have a lot of potential coming into next season, to be up there. And this is just them managing better, playing better players, and having the talent that they do have, work better. And of course, it didn't necessarily matter because they were going against me, the Trash Fires, at 214 points. Abysmal. If you saw that many points, you would not expect me to have a 15-7 record. But
right.
I'm just trying to hang on at this point to playoffs. I've had 4 losses in a row now. So I'm just trying to get a little bit back on top, win a couple weeks, and hopefully continue to the playoffs. Yeah, which I think, looking at this record, I don't think I'm gonna be upset out of the playoffs, but I'm definitely the bye week is definitely in contention.
100%. Let's just take a look at the overall standings, get the full picture. The trade deadline is, of course, over, so no more trade movement. Mm-hmm. And the top 3 teams are Irving Indica, the Trash Fires, and the Plano Nukes. And if you had told me that the Trash Fires and Plano Nukes were going to be in the top 3 teams after week 2 of this season, right? After week 2, maybe week 3, I would have said, what are you smoking?
You're crazy. Yeah, I would have too. I mean, you've done a great job jumping up the ranks here, right? I mean, you gained two slots of movement here. That's nothing to forget about. I think that just goes to show your ability as a manager and the talent that you do have on your team.
Right. And then, of course, looking at this too, record-wise, I don't think anyone is safe as far as playoffs go. I mean, it's unlikely, but I believe that there is a way that the Irving Indica miss the playoffs.
You think that? Okay.
Okay. Let me explain. Now,
sure.
I'm actually not sure with scheduling how that all works out. I think Irving Indica most likely has clinched it, but they're only 6 games ahead of CD's Nuts, who's in the 7th spot, and CD's Nuts, would have the. Actually, they wouldn't anymore because of this last week. Oof. Yeah, so maybe not. I think Irving Indica's probably clutched it.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm sitting right there, 1 win beneath them, but I don't know that I'll be I don't know that I'll be closed out. I mean, I think there's a really high likelihood that the Trash Fires have clinched it too here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We just have to see a lot of stuff happen, right? And I'm going up against Castle Rock Rockers next week. You know what I mean? So that, depending on how that game turns out, we could see a very, very different ranking. But I think for now, I feel safe. But I to your point, I'm really not.
Right. And looking at sort of those bubble teams right now, And it's tough to even call certain teams a bubble team because it feels like a lot of people in the bubble. But Castle Rock Rockers and CD's Nuts are kind of the two bubble teams. Castle Rock Rockers at 12-10, CD's Nuts at 10-12. But I want to make a point to look at Point Break. 8-14, there are reasonable paths in which they surpass Castle Rock Rockers and CD's Nuts. If they decide to go and win out these next 3 weeks before the playoffs, there's 3 more weeks, week 12, week 13, week 14. And then Castle Rock Rockers and CD's Nuts lose, Point Break's in.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. And I think we'll get that determination sooner than the next few weeks. I think week 12 is really the decider here, right? I mean, we're talking. Like I said, I'm going up against Castle Rock Rockers. So if I manage to win, I've definitely clutched my playoff spot. But that puts Castle Rock Rockers in an even more dangerous position than they're already in. And all it takes is CD's Nuts, which is a team that we've historically seen do very well, which we can see here with their max points. That puts them in great positioning to take over for that bottom spot.
Right. Now, the only thing about next week, CD's Nuts is going to be playing the T11 Tudgaze, who does put up very good points, especially lately. And so that's going to be, I think, we have to choose a game of the week, right? And I think that the game of the there are a lot of good upcoming. Let's just go over it real fast. So upcoming this next week, it's going to be Plano Nukes versus Point Break. Now, this is a big game because if I get a double win, I secure myself. And I start seriously contending for a bye week. Yeah. And if Point Break gets a double win, they start seriously contending as a playoff spot.
And not to mention, I mean that would drop Plano Nukes a lot further than I would expect them to drop right now. You are projected to win, but I mean I guess we'll just have to see how it goes.
100%. Now, aside from that, of course, Irving Indica is going to be playing the Dallas Clovers. I don't see Irving Indica losing at all.
I don't either. I don't think there's a shot. They are tied for the highest projected winning percentage of 60% over the Dallas Clovers.
Now we'll have to see if different players are subbed out and whatnot in the few days still to come for that. But Dallas Clovers historically has had really weird weeks in which they eke out wins over top teams. It happened to the Castle Rock Rockers, and it put the Castle Rock Rockers in a bad spot. I'm pretty sure that Dallas Clovers have actually beaten Irving Indica previously, and then just this past week they beat the Atlanta Cicadas. So who knows? They're a weird team.
Yeah, no, I mean it could happen. It could happen, especially if the Irving Indica has another 250-point week like they did this week, right?
Yep. Exactly.
I mean, if they were against the Dallas Clovers this week, they would have lost. So always something to consider.
Any given Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And then of course Atlanta Cicadas versus No Robins. Who knows? I mean, it's another trap game. I don't see, in the same way that I really don't see Irving Indica losing next week. I don't see Atlanta Cicadas losing, but you never know.
They're kind of similar. Right? I mean, especially like they have their big blowout weeks, and then they have their weeks that are still good, but not as good as they've done, right? And I think it's just, that has just worked out better for Irving Indica than it has for the Cicadas.
Totally agree. I mean, I think that you're spot on with saying that they're two very similar. Now, a very interesting game, like you already kind of mentioned. You, the Trash Fires, are going to be up against Castle Rock Rockers. That's a huge game for both teams. Castle Rock Rockers is fighting for their playoff spot. You are fighting for your bye week spot.
Yeah.
That's a huge, two very, very good teams that have historically been putting up very good numbers week to week. Scary game.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel going into that matchup?
I'm nervous, right? Especially, I mean, coming off of Castle Rock Rockers making 424 points. I mean, I think anybody facing them would be nervous. I think the only person that has, obviously the only person that has more to lose than me is the Irving Indica, right? So it would be even scarier for them. Well, actually, I take that back, right? Because they've already pretty much secured their playoff spot. So I don't think that they'd necessarily be super worried about it. But, me looking at this, I am worried. But I also know that Castle Rock Rockers haven't made 400 points before, and so we'll play it by ear, and we're going to see if if the rankings change or how much they change by, right?
Right.
It is a huge week for the Castle Rock Rockers, though. This is a make or break moment, this game. So week 12. So we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the final game, another actually also really big game as far as playoff implications are concerned. TD11 Tudgays are facing the CD's Nuts. And in sort of the similar boat as you versus Castle Rock Rockers, CD's Nuts needs to double win the next 3 weeks in order to make their go at a playoff spot. And TD11 Tudgays at 13-9 are not safe.
They're in no way safe.
4, 5, and 6 are all one game away from each other, and any bad week and good weeks from the others are going to flip that real quick.
Yeah. So it's definitely going to be an interesting week for fantasy. I mean, for me, I'm hoping that this chart next week looks the exact same, but obviously that won't be the case. So we'll just have to wait and see.
It's going to be very exciting to see. Now, before we finish it up, one last thing. Who do you think are your top 3 teams right now?
Yeah, so last time you guys had me on the podcast, I think I put Irving Indica and I know Castle Rock Rockers. I can't remember the third team that I think it might have been the Cicadas. I think those were my 3 last time. And I strayed a lot from the ranking at that point. I think I was ranked. Actually, I think I might have been ranked first at that point. You were ranked first, yeah. I think right now, given how deep into the season we are and what we've seen, I'm gonna keep it very vanilla here, and I'm gonna say it's Irving Indica, Trash Fires, and Plano Nukes.
Okay.
I mean, I just think that the records, the points, and even so far as to say the luck of the draw, right? I think that I think there's a reason that these teams are the top 3.
Right. Now, for my own, I am going to be extremely biased, but I think that I have some merit to say this. I think that my team, the Plano Nukes, is actually the number 1 team right now.
Oh.
And the reason for that is because I'm now on a 6-game win streak. Before that, I was on some crazy win streak as well, which I cannot remember for the life of me. I just ended up dropping a game. I have 8 losses, right? But I started the season, I believe, 0-6 or 1-5 or something like that.
You have come a long way without taking many losses since that point.
Right. And especially now trading for Jonathan Taylor and getting Kareem Hunt as a nice depth piece who knows, maybe when Deshaun Watson comes back, he's going to be throwing to Kareem Hunt a lot. You never know.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a lottery ticket at this point, but I strongly think that I am in a very strong position, especially to finish out the season well, because I have Point Break FC, and then week 13 I'll be facing Irving Indica, which if I, of course, win that, that'll drastically change the way that it works. And you know what, actually? Oh, yeah, there we go. And then week 14, the Atlanta Cicadas. And so, to me, while Atlanta Cicadas and Irving Indica are very strong teams, right? It means if I beat them, that puts me up at number 1 spot. Which, of course, now we're talking in the future and all this other stuff. But it'll be. I'm excited to see what's going to end up happening. Regardless.
Yeah, and if you do get to spot 1, I absolutely think that's deserved, right? I mean, I think you've been playing your team very well. I think, the Kareem Hunt trade, goes to show that, right? I think you're managing very well. So if you end up there, I won't be surprised one bit.
So that's a biased, of course, bit of a homer take, but I don't think I'm number 1. Now, number 2, the number 2 spot is so weird to me, and I want to put the Castle Rock Rockers there.
Really?
And I hate that I'm doing it. But
6th ranked right now, and you think that they're number 2. Okay.
Now now I hate it because, like you said, they're 6th ranked. I want to put them up there because their points for is so good.
It is massive.
I think that it only recently got so good due to trading and going very win now focused. They gave up a ton of future assets twice now in order to get a sort of late season boost. That I think it's so hard to say that they're anything other than, potentially the strongest team, or if not the second strongest.
I definitely think they have the talent base. I mean, it's not, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, right? 424 points, right? They definitely have the talent. There's a lot of teams that in the perfect situation could never make that many points.
Right, and I think that, honestly, as a non-biased person, I might be putting them at number 1, but I'm just so on the hype train of my own team right now, I'm going to put myself at number 1.
Right.
And, sue me. Complain about it in the comments. Right?
Right.
And then at number 3, I am going to put the Irving Indica.
Right.
Which, they're winning.
There's no surprise. Yeah, I mean, like, even when they have their 270, 240 point weeks, they're winning, right? It's results. Mm-hmm. It's right there on the board, I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by that.
They're a scary team to face each week.
Yeah, now, absolutely.
Now that we're into like playoff contention spots, I feel like I should say that my other 3 teams that I think are going to make playoffs.
Okay.
And in no particular order, that's easily the Trash Fires, TD11 Tudgays, and CD's Nuts.
Okay, so you're picking CD's Nuts. Okay, so you think the Tudgays are going to fall off?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So I strongly think that either the TD11 Tudgays or the Atlanta Cicadas are going to fall off. Now,
right.
Atlanta Cicadas are such a weird team for me to power rank because I think that they have so much talent. They have the highest max points for, but they don't get a lot of points when it comes to real situations. And so I think that them and the TD11 Tudgays are kind of at a weird spot. I think CD's Nuts has been just having a down week. They could have an upswing, but it's going to be crazy over the next 3 weeks to see who ends up where.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, I think Atlanta Cicadas and CD's Nuts both have very similar talent bases. Mm-hmm. I think they both have really, really star-studded talent, but like you're saying, it ultimately comes down to whether or not you're picking those people and starting them.
Right. Exactly. But I do see Point Break FC as a potential dark horse playoff candidate who could shake things up. Obviously, TD11 Tudgays and Atlanta Cicadas might just end up holding onto their spots totally fine. But I don't think that the top 6, as they are now, are going to remain that way at the end of the day when it comes down to the actual playoff time.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be really, really interesting to see. So keep watching, folks.
Yes, it's going to be an exciting next few weeks. And then once the playoffs start, it's only going to get even more fun. But until then, be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and leave a comment telling us about how wrong we are about our power rankings.
I'm sure I said several things bad. Let me know about it.
Make sure to make fun of him.
All right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Garrett, hope you're having fun off doing Thanksgiving stuff, and I hope everyone listening has a good Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Happy holidays, everyone.
See y'all.
Bye.